Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where today I'm going to be taking a look back at Resolution, the Doctor Who New Year special of 2019, unfortunately the only episode of this year, but the return of the Daleks, sort of. So what did I think of it? So of course the strong rumours and basically confirmation by the BBC did turn out to be true, and there would be the return of the Dalek in this episode. Of course only a single Dalek we get to actually see throughout this story, and in a one-off casing design rather than the properly new redesign for the Daleks. I'm not going to touch too much on the sort of design of the Daleks, because I did do a video about that yesterday, so if you have missed it, go check it out now on my channel, where I give a sort of in-depth analysis of what I like and disliked about this new Dalek design, and also why it's very important to remember that it is a one-off design and it's not the future of the Daleks. It is just for this one episode and you will never see it again. So if you didn't like it, it's fine, it's only for one episode. But yes, Resolution, this was an episode that I was actually quite excited for. The prospect of having Daleks back in a sort of big epic special sounded really sort of promising and exciting for an episode concept. And I think for me personally, it really kind of lived up to that excitement and that hype, whereas a lot of Chris Chibnall episodes, I've got reason, well, for certainly episode 1 and episode 10 of series 11 I got very excited for, and then Chris let it down massively. But I thought, like in this episode, it really worked. Right from the off, where we had that interesting idea of the Dalek. Okay, yes, it's a little bit far-fetched how the sort of soldiers from the 9th century defeated a Dalek. I'm not going to try to explain that one away. Yes, it's a little bit hard to believe, but still, it's then creates quite a nice idea where they broke the Dalek up into 3 pieces, or I think the mutant of the Dalek up into 3 pieces from what we could tell. And then burying it in different corners of the universe and corners of the Earth to try and sort of keep the Dalek apart and never let that creature come and wreak havoc once again. It was a really nice setup, nice bit of sort of different filming and giving a lot of scale, I think, to this episode. When we're going to Russia, we're going to some island I can't remember where, and then obviously Yorkshire, of course, because why not? And just sort of spreading across those 3 places, I thought made it gave it that extra sort of grand scale and epicness to the story. I thought the fonts were a little bit funny with the text on screen, but I think it was short enough time that it kind of worked. I almost feel like it felt a little bit Killing Eve in style, the sort of the text on screen kind of flashing up, sort of bam, that's where we are kind of thing. It did just have that feel of when they go to different countries in Killing Eve, so maybe copied from there, maybe not, who knows. But I thought that was a really just an interesting setup. Initially it felt like it was going to be a pre-title sequence, then of course we just never got any titles, which I have to say was a little bit weird. I know it made sense to do it with The Woman Who Fell to Earth in episode 1, but it was a little bit strange why Chris just decided not to have any titles at all. I mean, I think it would have been fine personally to put them at the very beginning, or even after that opening sequence. It sort of felt like there would have been a slot either place there, so that was a little bit of an odd decision. But I think once you kind of got past the first few minutes, you stopped thinking about it, and it really wasn't a problem. And so yes, then once we've got past this sort of opening sequence, we get down into the sewers, meeting these 2 new characters of Lynn and that other dude that I can't actually remember his name, which probably says it all about his character in this episode. They did feel like a little bit of a shoehorned in, we had a kiss, was that actually a kiss or not? Kind of like tying it to New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, of course, and trying to create some sort of connection between those 2 characters, which it felt like maybe a little bit too long, but I don't think it was too bad. But then it was quite sort of effective how we then got her discovering the Dalek mutant and then wondering quite what had happened as to why she was acting very strange after she had discovered this mutant. I think the redesign of the mutant looked fantastic. It was a proper kind of giant slimy mess sort of thing. It felt a lot more kind of menacing without its casing than maybe I think the Dalek used to. Or obviously usually we'd only see it in New Who, we'd only see the sort of mutant within the casing when it was sort of opened up. But it did look quite small and certainly a lot different. I almost feel like this is closer to the classic series than what the sort of new series design of the Dalek mutant has been. So I thought that was quite nice. And yes, it looked like a proper menacing threat on the wall, which I thought was really good. Naturally, the Doctor and co get involved in the whole shenanigans, of course. And I think one of the great moments is when the Doctor is scanning this, what ultimately turns out to be Dalek DNA, and suddenly realises what creature this is, and there's that just a moment of utter dread that I don't think we've really seen from the Doctor before, just realising sort of how significant this is that there's a Dalek on the Earth that survived. And just kind of the real worry about that. I thought it was just one of the great moments for the Doctor that we haven't seen a huge amount of in Series 11, where you can just see that pure dread, worry, anxiety on her face when she realises that I've got to face the Daleks again. I keep trying to defeat them, I just can't do it. I think she's something along the lines of, and they keep coming back. And I thought, yeah, that was just one of those great moments where you really saw the kind of, almost the darker side of the Doctor, almost this, not quite scared side of the Doctor, but very much this sort of fearful of this dangerous race of Daleks that she's going to have to defeat again. Then we get some very effective scenes with Lynn being sort of controlled by this Dalek mutant. That moment where she takes her jacket off and we see this Dalek strapped to the back, sort of strapped to her back and controlling her, is such a kind of creepy moment and really showing how desperate this Dalek has got to this stage, really, to be just taking in complete control of a woman, who we obviously then we realise why she's been acting really weirdly for the last sort of 5 minutes or so of this episode. And it proceeds to create some brilliant scenes as she's driving a car, getting stopped by the police and taking over the police, and then driving the police car and everything like that. Just it really kind of felt quite very exciting, I think, and quite sort of fast-paced and action-packed in terms of those sort of high-speed sort of car drives and everything that she was doing, being chased by the police and then wiping them out. So I thought that was all some really strong moments of this episode, just where the pacing was at a really sort of good point, as it was really kind of speeding up. And then, of course, there was the really slow, really painful, really long, unnecessary bit where we had Ryan and his dad chatting away in a diner for all of 5 or 6 minutes, and it just... This is what I think one of the sort of criticisms of the episode for me has to be, is how it just completely stops all the momentum this episode has built up to this point. Like, we've just gone through this high-speed action-packed sequence, and then it's just like, whoa, we're going to stop. We're going to forget about the whole plot of the episode for about 5 minutes and get Ryan chatting to his dad, who we've never met before and have had a few lines of dialogue about, but really don't care that much about, and suddenly expect us to be interested and care about his 5-minute chat about Ryan saying how his dad's been a terrible father and all this kind of thing. Like, I can see what Chris was trying to do. He wants to bring in that sort of extra family character, and he has somewhat teed up in the series bringing back Ryan's dad and kind of looking at that relationship and where that's gone right and wrong, and setting things up for later in the episode, of course, as well, when Ryan's dad is at the sort of centre of the denouement of the episode, shall we say. But it just felt like something that didn't really fit fantastically into this story. I think the biggest problem was it was something I just didn't really care about. And it's like, I'm invested and interested in this Dalek plotline here, and I want to see how is the Doctor going to defeat this Dalek. I don't really care about Ryan sitting and having a chat with his dad for 6 minutes. It's just that it felt too long, that scene. I think there was some nice stuff in there, talking about sort of what he wanted his dad to say to him and how he should have been a better father for him and things like that. It was good, in a way good to see, and I'm sure kind of maybe some people were able to identify with that sort of situation with their father. But it just felt a little bit too long, and I think a little bit out of place within sort of this area of this episode, as this episode, through a lot of it, seemed to want to be quite a fast-paced, action-packed episode. To then throw in this scene that really just stops all the momentum, I think just didn't really help it. And I feel like it's something that should have been either explored in Series 11 or at least kind of foreshadowed and brought into the stories more in Series 11, rather than a couple of lines of dialogue and then suddenly, boom, it's the focus of the special. So I thought, yes, this was definitely one of the kind of letdowns of this episode, I think, was just how the pacing was thrown off by this particular scene, and really the whole plotline with Ryan's dad throughout this story. Yes, I can kind of see what the whole reasoning behind exploring this was, because Chris wanted to kind of wrap up the threads of the series that we've seen so far, and this was something that was talked about, but it just didn't feel like really it was set up well enough to be satisfyingly explored in this single episode. Of course, I've got to address the UNIT issue in this episode, the leaving a bad taste in the mouth situation of UNIT being shut down because of Brexit for the time being. It was one of those great opportunities where Chris could have done a proper let's go back to the past and bring back another classic thing for the series, have UNIT versus the Daleks. It would have been really exciting, maybe even brought back Kate Stewart, and we all would have been loving it, and we would have loved Chris for it. But instead, he's like, no thanks, let's have a Brexit joke and shut it down for the time being. I mean, fear not, guys, I'm genuinely 100% confident that UNIT is going to come back in the future, whether it's under Chris Chibnall or under whoever writes the show after him. They're not going to get rid of UNIT when it's been in the show since 1968 and is one of the most famous things, both throughout Classic Who and New Doctor Who, having a character like the Brigadier as well, who's one of the most famous sort of characters of Doctor Who as a whole series, a whole show. And so I have absolutely the utmost confidence that UNIT will return. It's just a shame when this was actually a really good opportunity. I can see both sides. It's a shame because it was a good opportunity to bring them back and they chose not to. But I can also see it as a good kind of... Because you can think about, well, the Doctor's on Earth, why on earth doesn't she get some contact with some military that she knows and get them to come and help her out? Like, at least they addressed the fact that they're on Earth and she's just trying to do it on her own against a Dalek when she could go and get a whole lot of military to try and help her out and get UNIT and everything. So at least they kind of addressed that, but I just feel like they should have brought back UNIT or not addressed it at all, because it's just a little bit unsatisfying, I think, to sort of have UNIT be shut down, and particularly throw in a sort of pretty poor Brexit joke to try and sort of cover it up a little bit as well. So yeah, that was another little bit of a disappointment this episode, just when it had the potential. As soon as she said Kate Stewart, UNIT, I was getting so excited. I was like, might we actually see UNIT? Might we actually see Kate Stewart But no. Let's have a Brexit joke and move on. So yes, we skip past that bit, of course, and we move on to where the Daleks really kind of finally gets its casing together. There's some brilliant scenes in there. Well, I quite like the scene where we see the Dalek sort of trying to put itself, sort of build its own casing and put itself together using Lynn, of course. And just the kind of mirror sort of to the Doctor creating a sonic screwdriver in episode 1, it feels like a very similar workshop. It's possible it's the same set, I'm not quite sure, but some of the promo photos certainly made it look like the same set. And yeah, just that sort of these two sort of enemies having to kind of design in sort of scrappy workshops, designing their kind of weapons and their ways, their sort of devices to be able to move forwards and things like that, I thought was quite a nice sort of shadowing of each other, I think, in that sense. And then, of course, the Dalek and the Doctor confronting themselves for the first time was fantastic. Yes, I feel like this feels probably, for me, one of the most iconic moments of Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor so far. When that Dalek sort of blows through the doors, comes out to meet the Doctor, and we sort of have that first confrontation between the Doctor and the Dalek, where she initially sort of stops the Dalek from able to fire its weapon, then the Dalek fights back eventually and manages to blow that sort of that barrier that the sonic screwdriver has put up. She managed to blow that away, which I thought was fantastic. And just sort of the dialogue you had between the two of them, where the Doctor's kind of trying to understand what the Dalek's doing, learning about the Dalek, and then revealing herself to be the Doctor, and the Dalek realising who the Doctor is was just... And then wanting, of course, are there any of the Daleks to wants to kill the Doctor and everything like that. It just really, I think, showed off such... I think some of the best sides of Jodie that we've seen so far in the part. She really kind of showed that almost darker side, I think, a little bit, and showing that kind of very serious side, that side of meeting her arch nemesis and knowing she's still got to defeat them once again. And I just thought that, yes, it created such an effective scene there. And one other thing for the Daleks, which I didn't mention in my Dalek video yesterday, was the Dalek voices, which of course were still Nick Briggs, which is absolutely fantastic. Nicholas Briggs came back to do the Dalek voices. He's been doing them since 2005, since Dalek, and he is very much the kind of the Dalek voice nowadays for Doctor Who. Since the show came back, he's always done it, and I thought that just kind of added to the episode, really, just having him as the sort of being brought back and having that such piercing, menacing, effective voice there that nobody else seems to be able to quite match, I think. He's just got nailed to a T, and so I thought that was really fantastic and just, again, brought out the menace of the Dalek there. And following that sort of confrontation in this kind of barn almost, I think what these next few scenes kind of show how really bring the Dalek back, as this particular Dalek at least, but hopefully the Daleks in general, back as a threat. Back as the properly ruthless villains that don't care about anybody else and just want to kill and conquer. And we saw that with that scene when the Dalek landed on this sort of battlefield in front of these probably 50 or 60 soldiers there, and just proceeded to take them all out, just completely destroyed all of them ruthlessly. And that's something we've seen so little of with the Daleks in sort of recent Doctor Who episodes. They've very much been almost not scared to shoot people, but it seems like they just felt like, apart from Into the Dalek, in a lot of the Moffat Doctor Who Dalek stories, there was very little of Daleks actually killing people. They were just there a lot of the time, talking away, waffling about how they're going to destroy the universe or whatever, and then never actually doing anything. And so I thought it was just brilliant to see kind of the Daleks almost getting back to basics, this Dalek, just sat there in front of 60-odd soldiers and then just bam, 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 firing away, destroying them all, having those missiles that launching out of it's the bottom of its casing to deflect the missile from the tank, which might have actually destroyed the Dalek. And the Dalek being able to fly as well, which I thought was fantastic as well, and just added a bit more to it. And it just really, yes, I thought showed it as a threat, even when it got to GCHQ at the end of the episode as well, when it came into that room and it just completely, just instantly destroyed that person that was sort of standing there running the place. When he clearly looked like he was just going to run away, the Dalek was like, no, just going to kill you. And so I thought that all just really built up how ruthless the Daleks really are. And so for me, really did re-establish them as a threat, where they weren't so much in the previous episodes. I was just watching it and I'm just like, this is the Daleks, this is what they're meant to be, this is how they work. And so I was really, really pleased to see Chris write them like that and being so ruthless, this single Dalek that just can kill so many people. And I know some people did somewhat compare this episode to Dalek, but for me, personally, I think it's more the fact that there's just a single Dalek in this episode is why people are comparing it to the Christopher Eccleston story Dalek. It's, other than that, the plot really doesn't follow this particularly similarly. It's not really focusing on the same kind of things. It really is just the fact that it's a single Dalek that people I think are drawing that comparison. And so I think it is a fairly original story in that regard, and this Dalek just trying to obviously contact its fleet once again and try and survive, but the fact it's having to survive from mutant only rather than from its casing really adds an extra twist to it, I think, in this story. One of the real highlights, I think, of this episode as well was the amount of scenes we got in the TARDIS. I think it's fair to say that throughout Series 11 there was a lack of TARDIS scenes and a lot, just across the board really. They didn't feel like we had a particularly large amount of screen time for the TARDIS. But in this episode we must have spent like a good 10 minutes or so in the TARDIS. There were lots of different scenes and lots of different shots of different angles of the TARDIS. A new scene when Mitch came into the TARDIS for the first time, which we saw, which is a really nice kind of shot, and Ryan's dad, Aaron, coming into the TARDIS as well, was really nicely done. And so I think it was just great to really kind of get more of a feel for this TARDIS and just see a little bit more of it, have it a bit more involved in the episode, because it is such a iconic and fundamental part of Doctor Who. To see a lot more of it, just, yeah, it was really, really pleasing to see. Before I get to the sort of finale of this episode, the one absolute clunker of a scene that I cannot fathom why Chris, the BBC, everybody said, yeah, let's put that in the episode, why not? Because it's just terrible, is the comedic moment where the Wi-Fi goes down and we cut to some random family's house exclaiming about how the Wi-Fi's gone down and how the phone signal's gone down and how Netflix has gone down, and now we'll have to have a conversation? Oh, it was terrible. Like, the acting itself was terrible, the dialogue was terrible. It was a scene completely out of place in this episode and should have been in some farcical comedy, really, and yet it's in a serious moment in an episode of Doctor Who. It was just bizarre, and it just took you out of the action there for that moment. It was just like, why did they think that was a good idea? Was it just trying to get a laugh from the kids or something? I don't know, because it's not funny to the adults. It's just ridiculous and stupid to the adults who actually care about the show and want it to sort of, and are really invested in the plot at this point. It just, yeah, it really baffles me why they put that into this episode and why they thought that was a good idea. So it was rather a shame. And so we reach the denouement of this episode with the Dalek in GCHQ. The Doctor arrives to try and defeat it as well. Does quite, I mean, the Dalek defeated by a microwave, it's not great. But ultimately, of course, it's only the Dalek casing that's defeated by a microwave, you've got to bear in mind. It's not the actual Dalek. The Dalek's clever enough to escape before its casing's blown up with it inside, which is something we have seen very little of in Doctor Who. Certainly in New Who, I don't remember any real times where the Dalek has escaped its casing to try and survive as its casing is being destroyed. So that was really good, I thought. Even if it was a dramatic moment, but maybe not the most sort of interesting and exciting, sort of clever solution to be just defeated by a microwave, and defeating the Dalek, sort of the Doctor kind of tricking the Dalek into shooting out all the sensors and things that they were sending off the signal was a bit stupid from the Dalek as well, I think it's fair to say. So that bit wasn't so great, but it was good to see that the Dalek did sort of survive that moment and wasn't just defeated in its casing, was able to kind of control Aaron, Ryan's dad, for a little bit there as well, and then asking to be taken to the Dalek fleet, which was then I was like, okay, there's only 5 minutes left, but oh, can we at least get a quick little shot of a Dalek fleet? I would be so excited to actually see a redesigned Dalek. Is that what it's going to be? But no, of course it's not. The Doctor's tricking the Dalek into being sent into a supernova. And then, of course, we have our emotional moment, which has been teed up earlier in the episode, of Ryan and his dad and the whole sort of situation. Him saying, I love you because you're about to die, essentially. Which, given how much he didn't seem to love his dad throughout the series and in this episode, it felt a little bit kind of almost unrealistic to him. I know his dad's on the verge of death, but still, it felt a little bit iffy to be telling, I love you, Dad, it's all okay, don't worry, I love you now, and whatever. It didn't quite do it for me. I feel like also the problem was I didn't care enough about Aaron as a character, as Ryan's dad. We've seen him for a few minutes in this episode, and I just didn't really care if he died or not. Like, he wouldn't have bothered me if he had been pulled in or not. So I feel like it would have been better if it had been Graham in Ryan's dad's place there. And maybe just have forgotten Ryan's dad for this episode, because I feel like that was where the weak link was in a lot of this story, was having him in it. And so replacing Graham in that position, there would have been a genuine worry and threat and shock of, is he actually going to die? We're actually going to kill off one of the companions and things like that in this episode. So I just feel like that could have been a better way of doing it, but of course they are all saved in the end. And so it creates a reasonably good sort of solution to the episode, a resolution, and way of defeating the Dalek, which didn't feel too kind of silly and easy in that regard. It kind of took, you have to destroy the casing first, and then you could defeat the Dalek, kind of tricking it into being forced into a supernova. So that I thought was reasonably effective and gave a reasonably satisfying conclusion to the story. And then, of course, a couple of nice scenes to finish off with the Doctor and the Dalek, and the Doctor and the companions heading off the TARDIS to travel on more adventures in the future. Where they go, who knows? Everywhere, of course. There was quite a nice scene as the TARDIS kind of dematerialised and then almost sort of materialised in the vortex, and we see it kind of the TARDIS in the exactly same place, and then the background changes into the vortex as it kind of flies off into the distance, and the shot fades to black. So it was a nice way to close it out. I was hoping there might be some sort of cliffhanger or plot thread hanging over or something, but unfortunately there hasn't really been anything from this episode. And that's it until 2020. So yes, we've got a long old way to wait until the next episode, but I do think that Resolution was, for me, a high point to go out on. Yes, I've had certain criticisms with the episode, and I've sort of explained that, but it was more felt like the criticisms were individual scenes rather than massive parts of the story and the episode as a whole. It was sort of little moments that didn't need to be there rather than the whole thing being bad for me. Overall, the sort of general plot of the story was really interesting, with the Dalek having to try and sort of revive itself, come back to life, create a casing, and kind of then go and kill people because why not, and then try and contact the Dalek fleet to get back. That was all quite good. The Doctor trying to defeat that, of course, was nice and effectively done, and that obviously took up the bulk of the episode, and I was very interested in that. The plotline with Ryan's dad, not so fast, it wasn't so great, and there are a couple of clunky scenes in there. The unit gag was a little bit unnecessary, disappointing to not have unit back. But other than that, overall, I do think it was a very strong story. I thought it was Chris Chibnall's best Doctor episode so far, personally, and it gave me optimism for the future, I think. This episode felt like what I want Doctor Who to be in the future. It felt more like Doctor Who, the sort of Doctor Who that I wanted to watch. Seeing a return of a classic monster, seeing a good plot, having this as a proper, actually good villain, and things like that, and a proper threat to the Doctor and everybody, and actually killing people as well. I think it just all kind of came together in this story a bit more than it did through most of Series 11 for me personally. So yes, overall, a big highlight of the Jodie Whittaker and the Chris Chibnall era so far. Probably in my top 3 episodes that have come out of this era so far, along with It Takes You Away, and maybe Kablam possibly as well. I think are probably the top ones that have been done so far, but absolutely Chris's best script so far. And despite the really long wait, I am optimistic that when it comes back, it's going to get better. But what about you guys? What did you think of this episode of Resolution, the final episode of Doctor Who for probably a year? Did you enjoy it? Did you think the plot was good? Did you think that Ryan's dad was necessary? Did you like the Dalek in this episode? Are you looking forward to the future? Or are you sort of sad to see there's a gap year and very disappointed? I just love to hear all your thoughts on Resolution and the future of, or the next year of Doctor Who. But other than that, guys, that is just about it from this video. I did want to say that despite, of course, this is the end of Doctor Who on TV for the time being, this is certainly not the end of EMS Productions and my channel and videos. I'm already got lots of sort of plans underway, videos recorded and things like that, ready to sort of be coming in the coming weeks and months on my channel. I'm aiming to get sort of 2 videos a week or so, hopefully, for as long as I can, continuing that through for the whole year. Optimistically maybe, but I'm going to try it, so I'd love for you guys to stick around on my channel, because every single week you will be seeing new Doctor Who related content from myself, and hopefully something to look forward to in the Doctor Who-less year. But that's it from this video, guys. Do remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye!